Football games have many aspects of controversy, from players to judges to teams to even organizations. But there are themes that always seem to repeat themselves, things that always seem to appear and manifest during games that never seem to quite go away. These are controversial aspects that always repeat themselves during FIFA World Cup games. It's more than just a game of football. Modern games, especially those on an international level of competition, have an extraordinary level of pressure to them, associated with them, and as a result of them. Not just the World Cup, but regional and local games as well. Originally, only the World Cup games had aspects of importance relating to it, but other games were exactly just that, just games. Pressure to perform at the top of the pyramid seeped down to its lower levels, so aspects of competition and the desire to do as much or as well as possible has come down to more distant games. The thought being that if you do better at more regional and local games, the more ready you are or would be for international competition and even at World Cup level performances. This is why teams, organizations, and even countries now take any sort of competition related to football seriously. The machine. The whole aspect of players being selected for teams, or in particular, African players desiring to play for European football clubs, has had an underlay of controversy, bribes, sexual abuse, and broken dreams. It's been documented that boys and men hopeful to play for European organizations would often seek to travel to Europe illegally and do whatever they could to play for a said team of any country. Some of these men have called the entire process the machine, at how deep and intricate the corruption goes. Many are brought to Europe with no real chances of playing, and often are forced to perform sexual acts for older club officials. If they speak out, their chances at playing, making any income, or even a way back home is instantly gone. It's been said that the machine continuously updates itself to bypass current European laws, and nearly every club in Europe is involved in some way. Those who escape back to Africa try to tell their stories to others in the hopes that someone or some governing body can help, but the desire to play for the European clubs from individual players and lack of political, monetary, or social strength from local or national levels leaves the machine intact and destroying countless dreams and lives in the process. The Latin dominance in the sport. Many European teams, as well as the Americans, have complained at the dominance of the South American teams, in particular Brazil. If we extend the range even more and include Argentina, Italy, Portugal, Spain, and Uruguay, then the greater Latin scope has dominated the World Cup since its conception. By World Cup championship wins, the only non-Latin European team that can even be in the same level of discussion is Germany. And if we must extend the range further for discussion, then England and France, but they would barely qualify in this discussion when compared to the sheer win count of Brazil. Other teams might do successful, but with wins, the records speak for itself. The Spanish and Portuguese have not necessarily complained because it's a legacy of their own method of practice left by colonialism. And when the dominance debate is brought up, if anything, they would actually try to defend it. Observations and theories by the American and European teams have put forth reasons for the South American dominance. Called the Brazilian and Argentinian methods of play, it's how the players train for the games, their mentality of play, and the interaction with one another during the said match. A less romantic explanation first proposed by the Americans and expounded upon by the British and French is that South America is still a relatively underdeveloped region of the world, and for many youths there, football is one of the few things that they have. They're good at the sport because they have nothing else to do, unrealized American potential. One important detail that's often overlooked or not necessarily known is the fact that the American football team once progressed all the way through to the semifinals of one of the prior tournaments. The American team isn't anywhere near the European or Latin or Asian teams. That feat was an extraordinary aspect of skill that has not been repeated in essentially 100 years. According to some, they could have gone farther in the tournament if the circumstances were a bit different. With modern football games and competitions, teams often need enormous amounts of funding for expenses and a wide range of players to choose from for the right fit for the national or international team. The United States has all this, but for whatever reason that potential isn't realized. The Europeans have mentioned more than once that the reason why the Americans don't live up to this possible potential as a football nation is because they have other sports to play, and these sport organizations don't want to lose any possible income or revenue to football sources. Though that might change as the sport slowly increases in popularity with each passing World Cup. The Australian football team joining the Asian League. When the Australian football team shifted from the Oceania League to the Asian League, this actually raised questions about teams qualifying for the World Cup and what is considered fair play during international competition with relation to team skill and resources for the said team. Originally in the Pacific region, Australia and New Zealand were the main teams and often played against one another, not only in World Cup competition but regional games as well. The skill of the players from the two teams and resources for the football organizations meant that the other Pacific Island nations were almost always playing for third place or lower than that. Once the Australian team joined the Asian Federation, they assumed that it would be an easier route to World Cup qualifying tournaments and with more marketing exposure throughout Asia. This has been somewhat true. The Australian team has had more success in Asia, but is often stopped by the Japanese or Korean teams. The Pacific teams have actually experienced an increase in terms of diversity, with teams playing and winning games. Besides New Zealand, Tahiti and Fiji have also been represented in international events and football competitions. The case of Australia, a South Pacific nation playing in the Asian region, isn't exactly unique. Kazakhstan, a Central Asian nation, switched its affiliation from Asia to Europe. Suriname and Guyana, while geographically part of South America, have always played in North American World Cup qualifying matches. So if a reason exists and the said reason is good enough, then a nation can switch regions for World Cup or international play. The FIFA Women's World Cup. The World Cup is seen as the most important and prestigious competition of any sort in the world, and it's an undeniably male event. This was a main reason why the Women's Cup was created, to give women an equal representation during international games and competition for football and to promote women in sports. In some aspects, the Women's World Cup has done feats within it that the Men's World Cup has not done. The American women's team was the first to win 3 titles, and has been seen as the strongest team since the Women's Cup was first devised. Brazilian and Japanese women from their national teams have competed in 6 World Cup games consecutively. This feat has not been done comparatively in the Men's World Cup. While the Women's World Cup is also gaining popularity, it's not seen as the same level in terms of competition that the Men's World Cup is. Many don't even compare the two cups. It can even be viewed as diminishing the status of the Men's World Cup. It has gone far as some countries do not even televise matches of the women's games, as to not encourage the development of women or girls playing football or even the concept of a Women's World Cup of any kind. These are just some of the controversies that have always seemed to repeat themselves or manifest when it comes time for the World Cup to be hosted and played.